Welcome back to the Ambassadors Podcast. I'm here with my dear friend Justin Zark. Welcome back, Justin.
Thank you.
Merry Serbian Christmas today.
I don't know what just happened, Johnny, but right when we started, your mic went way quieter, so now I can barely hear
Turn
you.
down my volume.
Turn it up a bit more.
Can you hear me?
Okay, that's much better.
Yeah, sorry. I was starting to get feedback through it, so that's why.
Okay.
But anyhow, today is Serbian Christmas. Can you believe it?
Is it actually?
Yeah, January 7th.
Wow. I had no idea.
All right.
We're Serbian, but not that Serbian.
Yeah, we're not that Serbian.
Or at least me.
Like the second I said that, someone left the Discord. It was a joke, people. It was a joke.
Don't take it so seriously.
Joe, how you doing? How's your day?
It was good, thank God. Work is boring as usual, but
Nice.
I enjoy it. So thank God. I've been trying to be more grateful recently because there's just a bunch of stuff going on in the world that's really crazy. And as much as I feel like it impacts me, it actually kind of doesn't that much. I still have a job. I still go to church. I still have my group of friends. I still have my family that loves me. And there's a lot of things that I can be thankful for, especially having such a loving household in the past. If you really listen to a lot of testimonies of people that got crazy into drugs, and I just listened to these testimonies of people online where their life as a child was terrible. And then it just kind of, they get completely set back compared to people that have more of a normal upbringing. And I'm just trying to be more grateful for that. And so sometimes I kneel down in my bed in the evenings and I'll just be like, thank you, God, for this absolutely mundane, boring day. Because nobody in my family died. Nobody got hurt. Nothing bad happened. And thank God for that. So that's kind of where I am. It's like life is boring most of the time, actually, but I'm thankful for it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we misunderstand boring with like peace or simpleness. And I think there's meaning in a quiet, simple, even if you might say it's mundane, something that's not constantly. I mean, I think we should be worried about important things, right? I think as Christians are the ones who have the moral high ground, if you want to put it that way, because morality comes from our scriptures and nowhere else. Everything else is a copycat. So if we don't care, then no one does. But at the same time, it's funny that you even say that, because that's kind of what I was thinking about talking about today too, was what life's about, or certain important things in life. But yeah, I mean, there's craziness going on in the world. Literally just today, Wednesday, they had the huge ice stuff that's happening in Minnesota. I don't know if you saw that, but
I haven't.
Just big protests. A woman got shot by an ICE person, like some white woman. It wasn't like a Mexican being deported, but she almost ran over a cop, and like in self-defense, he like pulled out his gun and shot her. So the video, I mean, depends how you judge it. You can look at it either way, and you can say it was self-defense, or you can watch it and say he murdered her, like cold blood. It's two different sides of it. I saw the video, and to me, it looked like it was self-defense, or it was fight or flight. I don't think it was like he gunned her down. I think it was more like she literally almost ran him over, and so he jumped out of the way and just fight or flight kicked in and he shot her. Should he have shot her the 2 times after she had already kind of drove away? No, I don't know. I don't think any of us can pretend like we know what we do in the circumstance. But regardless, crazy stuff's happening today. Now I'm sure I think it's going to be like another George Floyd thing. Like, that's how serious this is. There's already huge protests already happening. And so we might be getting into even darker times, which, I mean, I don't think we have to worry about it where me and you live in Colorado, because most people don't really, I don't think we've ever seen a riot in our life here, but places like Chicago and Detroit and parts of Minnesota.
Were there riots up in Denver?
Yeah, there's riots up in Denver.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're as big as they've been in places like Detroit and
no huge truckloads
like
of bricks. No huge truckloads of bricks just put on the side of the roads.
Yeah.
Dude, talk about that.
It's kind of crazy. It's some of the stuff that's been happening with, like, I'm not even kidding. Like the next day after I think Trump released a bill all these different cities that people started protesting because it was a mass deportation. I don't know if it was executive order or whatever he was doing. Command from the king. All across the city, all across the U.S., all these cities, people started protesting. Like naturally, I guess they would because of the left, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they all had the exact same signs. They all
Yeah.
had the exact same. It's really weird.
Yeah.
But when I say exact same signs, I don't mean they wrote the same logo. I mean carbon copy, printed, same wood, same print, same everything.
Yeah.
It looks like they all went to the same Walgreens, and it just happened. It's like you're saying, the bricks being truckloads of bricks.
Yeah. Nothing to see here, fellas.
Nothing to see here. But you want to know what? We said it a little bit before on the last podcast, and me and Justin, we think we might have gotten a little bit off track, and not for no good reason, right? A lot of the things we've been doing have been questions that our listeners have been asking, and they're curious. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You guys like our conversations, and you like being a fly in the wall, and what would just be a normal conversation me and Justin would normally be having over a pool table. But I mean, that's usually
You're
how me
losing.
doesn't. Yeah, I'm usually losing because I don't have one at my house. Okay, so I didn't grow up being a shark like you. Justin's really good. He's actually really good at pool.
I'm not that good.
Well, compared to me,
I'm just better than Johnny. That's all.
Okay. Okay.
You're welcome.
But regardless, me and Justin feel like, and we've talked about this on the last podcast briefly, that we've definitely kind of gone off topic of what Ambassadors is supposed to be out. It's been a fun ride as far as a lot of the topics that we have been talking about. And we're not saying we'll never discuss things people want us to discuss in the future. I think we're moving some of those topics more towards a not normal podcast, which Justin is always welcome to if he's interested in being a guest on. And if there's a topic that he specifically wants to talk about that he doesn't think is Ambassadors, esque style, and then of course Justin knows he's more than welcome to come on the Not Normal podcast and me and him can hash it out there or just talk about it and build on it. But me and Justin want to go back to what Ambassadors is supposed to be about, which is faith, which is what we've always talked about. And that's kind of the little leg that we went a little too far on and a little too much liberty with that as far as what that covered. But it's also the outdoors, and it's supposed to be servanthood. The bigger scheme or the bigger picture of what Ambassadors is, and also those things together. And so today's episode, our topic might be familiar to some things we might have talked about in early episodes of the Ambassadors podcast, but it's still something interesting that I think me and Justin probably both have new, fresher thoughts on, or even if we're reiterating stuff we said in the past, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with reiterating truth and things that we think are important. And so I texted Justin today and asked him if he wanted to talk about fasting and praying, and if he had any other ideas, he's more than welcome to bring them up, and maybe me and him would chew on them together. But fasting and praying, but specifically around the wilderness. So I think that's all that I said. In the wilderness, yeah. So fasting and praying in the wilderness. Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit more about the wilderness. I just started reading The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first book in the Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So it's the first out of the three, and I think I'm like in chapter 11 or something like that. Amazing book. I love the Lord of the Rings series. It's my favorite. Next to Star Wars, I don't know which one I like more. I'm a very big nerd.
I like
it just
the
got me
Rings of
thinking.
Power. I think it's an awesome show.
I will. Never mind. I can't say that on this podcast. But on the Not Normal podcast,
I'm kidding.
I would have said something dirty.
I'm kidding.
Something dirty to you. I would have spat some dirt in your eye for saying something like that. Rings of Power should not exist. Don't get me started, Justin. Anyways, back to my point. What are you tapping away? I can hear your fingers tapping away.
The chat says I'm still very quiet. Oh, well.
Oh.
Oh, well.
Can you guys hear Justin, or is it just my problem? They say I'm really quiet. I hear him fine. Yeah, maybe you got to open your ears, bro. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Like how we treat our listeners. I don't know how to turn him up. He's listening. You guys they're watching to the stream, but
yeah,
I'm just kidding, my dude. Anyways, but it got me thinking a lot because, dude, Tolkien is such an amazing author. Have you read any of the Lord of the Rings yet, Justin?
So I read through the Hobbit series a long time ago, and then I recently just watched the movies, and I really I'm just going to read through all the Hobbit and then all of the Lord of the Rings kind of back to back in preparation to see the movies, because I really enjoyed the storytelling in the Hobbit movies. I think Smaug was like the best villain ever, dude. He was
Dude,
so
you
cool.
wait until you hit the Fellowship of the Ring. It's so it's something else. The Hobbit is good. I've read The Hobbit, and the Hobbit is amazing too. But like The Hobbit is like it's so small in comparison
Mhm.
of like the actual The Rings, and just Tolkien's imagination, his storytelling. It's the least expected thing when
Mhm.
you even when you see a picture of him or how you would imagine a man like him. But his like intelligence is just you see it fall out on the pages. And it reminded me, and part of the reason I want to do today's podcast, of so many things I can relate to in my life. I think anyone can enjoy Lord of the Rings, but I think there's something special to, and it's kind of akin to Christ's parables when he talks about things like farm animals and uses examples of farm work or labor in the field or the Bible uses that type of language of warriors or swords and shields, talking to a generation of people who were very familiar with that. They knew what the scent of a barn smelled like. They knew what it was like working with animals. They understood the stiffness of a horse or the danger of a snake, because these were things that they were encountering every single day. And Christ uses those analogies all the time, and things like labor in the field and kings and queens and things like that those people can relate to. That the parables were actually something that we can read today and we can understand, and they can simplify it, but we will never really understand it unless you have lived that lifestyle. And I think, to use that example, the allegory, which I know J.R.R. Tolkien doesn't say was directly an allegory of scripture, though obviously he uses biblical themes. It's not to the same extent that I would say um, Narnia is, which is basically Pilgrim's Progress with Santa in it. But when you look at The Lord of the Rings, and you've been, and Justin can relate to this, raised in mountains and lived in the Rocky Mountains, or at least how me and him are raised, and you are born again, raised in the church Christian, and understand things like spiritual warfare because of how long me and you have been battling it. There's just so much of it that is really applicable in a large scale macro thing, but also in a micro, which I want to get and touch on today when it comes to even the day to day lives, like the small things that you kind of started the podcast talking about. So that's a little bit of a foreshadowing of what my thoughts were kind of thinking about today as I was working. But first, let's kind of go into maybe some of your thoughts. You were just in the mountains recently. I know you briefly talked about it last time, but you talked more about your experience of being up there, and you're like, yeah, it was nice. We went hot springs, and it was a good, and you had a little beetle infestation in the Airbnb, which sucked. But talk a little bit more about maybe like, did you feel closer to God? Did you connect with him? And maybe your thoughts about just the topic today of fasting and praying after you talk about just maybe more of the spiritual connection you had with God when you went to the mountains recently.
So, I mean, there's different reasons for going into the mountains. And for me, sometimes it is more spiritual, and then sometimes it's definitely less spiritual. So it's not like every time I'm next to a mountain, I'm just like in some higher plane, right? So that last trip specifically, I actually brought my laptop, and I had intended to do my Bible studies and do whatever, just spend some time in the mornings, really looking into the word and praying. But when you're with your family and you're hanging out, you kind of stay up late, spending time together, playing some games, little board games. And then so you get to bed late, and then you get up a little bit later, and then everybody's around the table talking, and there's not, I guess I could have just done it in my room, but I just don't have as much time or as much privacy when we're in a family trip all in the same house. So for me, that experience was not spiritually, or like it wasn't a spiritual experience specifically, although I am thankful for the time that I got to spend with my family and my cousin and my aunt who I don't really see terribly often. So in one aspect, the spiritual part of it for me is having fellowship with the people that I love and spending time with them, because ultimately that's what matters more than pretty much anything, is spending time with the people that you love. And I would say spending time with people you don't like very much either, but who you're trying to be a good example to. But the focus in all cases is the people, right? It's not about where you are, whether it's the mountains or some other place. And it's not about, what you're doing. It's about who you're with. So that's kind of my take for that trip specifically.
Nice. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sometimes, but then again, it's still like the simpleness, right? It's kind of funny how, I heard this recently while witnessing to someone. They said like they didn't want to become a Christian because their life would no longer be fun. It's like, what do you mean? You mean your life won't be full of ecstasy? You mean you won't be dulling your brain chasing the porn and the drugs and the women and the men or whatever it is that you like? And you see what I'm saying? Like their fun is a dopamine, not rush, but abuse. And it's not what I think what I would consider to be fun. I would say what you did surpasses that. And it goes into, again, kind of what I was thinking about today as well. It's like meaning. The day-to-day life is something that's a lot deeper than just this chase of an inrush of a fake sense of, it gives you this fake sense of security because it's distracting you from ultimately death. But a believer is the one person who can truly enjoy life because they're not scared of it ending. They can be in the moment and live every day like it's their last, but it has a completely different meaning than when people say live every day like it's your last. To believer takes on a completely different definition. Because your trip was simple. There was nothing extravagant about it. It was simply the fellowship of your family and the
Yeah.
fellowship of being separated from everyone else, being in a hot springs in God's nature and excused from the distractions of the world. That sounds pretty fun to me.
Dude, it was great. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And this just came to me, but so, probably wrong, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I think the idea of fun, just, what is fun? I think the word fun is actually kind of just a synonym for escape, right?
Mm.
When people have a lot of fun, whether you're going out and bowling or you're taking drugs or anything that people consider to be fun, right? You're escaping from your normal daily life. Sometimes you're escaping from your problems or the things that haunt you or whatever it is, but it's just an escape mechanism. You're able to focus on something that's different for a short period of time. And I think that's kind of what people refer to when they say fun. And, there's the same thing for me on that family trip. I had a lot of fun because it distracted me just from my normal life. And I had a chance to do something that was more important to me, but it was still fun. So when people say, oh, I don't want to become a Christian because it's not fun, well, is that fun, the carnal, I just want to be distracted from my problems? Or is it something else? And I think it kind of tends towards the carnal, pleasure seeking distractions.
Yeah. I think there's a deeper thing that I'm kind of chasing, I guess you could say. Because for me, fun, like I separate, and because I don't think the English language maybe has the right word for it, or at least I'm just not educated enough to know it, where there's fun and then there's a good time. Like I imagine the fellowship of having family over and friends and having a good time and laughing and enjoying a meal and breaking bread together, and the jokes go around and the smiles on the faces and the warmth of family and the warmth of love between friendships. And then they leave and you have this relieving sigh of, that was a good time.
Hmm.
You could say that is fun, but fun just doesn't quite put it there. And
It's
fun doesn't,
fulfillment.
it's fulfillment. There's
Yeah.
something deeper there. There's something that is real, that is, it's like it's a connection, right? It feels like you're connecting to someone on a way that I'm having a hard time articulating in English, and I don't know any other languages, so I don't know if I could do it there either. But I think you kind of understand what I'm saying. There's a place for it. It feels like there's a placement that you just fitted perfectly in. And it was short lived, which makes it even more the worthwhile. But it was warm and it was kind. Whereas fun feels more selfish. Whereas a good time, and maybe there's a better way of putting it, feels more cooperative, feels more fulfilling and meaningful. Not that you can't have fun with other people, and not to say that you weren't having fun in the moment, but the word just doesn't perfectly, and I'm not saying you can't use that word for that, I don't know, maybe there's a synonym that could be better put there, but, yeah. What are your thoughts then on, and I think some of this ties together. I think we'll see the full circle here. What are your thoughts on fasting and praying, maybe on it in of itself? And have you ever experienced it in the wilderness, whether it was purposeful or not, but the practice of fasting and praying in the wilderness? And what is that like? How is that different? What is the significance to that?
So to be quite frank, I don't, I almost never think about fasting. And I think it's just something that not of my parents' fault or anything, but it just wasn't really something that we did normally. Or at least they didn't have the kids do it normally. And so, which makes sense. But it's not really something that's a big part of my life. And it's something that I want to um, start doing more. It was a month ago or maybe 2 months ago where I fasted. It was either a day and a half or 2 days. I don't exactly remember. But that experience really opened my eyes to some things which we can touch back in a second. So what I wanted to answer, I don't spend too much time thinking about fasting in general. It's something that I would like to do more, but it's not something that I've done in the wilderness.
Mm,
And I think that would be a really interesting experience just to go into the wilderness and don't pack any food and just go for a couple days or whatever it is and just see what happens when you're praying and fasting with nobody else around. And I kind of tried to do that one time before for a day, but it just didn't work out because one of the people wasn't fasting. And he was like making eggs and bacon. And I'm like trying to, me and my cousin are trying to do a Bible study, and he's just like cracking eggs, going, "You guys want some?"
I
No.
wonder who that is.
Yeah. So, anyways, not to dog them or anything. I'm just saying it didn't work, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What about you?
I haven't well, first off, I do want to say one thing. If you're gonna fast in the wilderness, do not pack food. Pack food
Yeah.
because there's always an option of being lost. And let's say you start fasting for 2 days, and then you get lost.
Yeah.
At that point, you need never go backpacking without food, even if you plan on not eating any of it. Always, for safety reasons, always have food with you. Justin knows that he didn't mean it that way, but he was just talking about an example there. So, um, being an outdoor podcast, we need to make sure we gotta be careful when we tell people here.
Sure.
Um, I have not voluntarily, like I've gone backpacking and I just have not eaten for a long time and had the hunger pains. And before I ate, spent time with God praying. So it was still fasting. And so it was intentional in the moment that I was like, I'm having serious hunger pains right now. Instead of just eating the food I have with me right now, I'm going to eat it, but I'm not going to eat it right now. Maybe I should spend some time with God and praying and stuff. And so I've just saw the opportunity, realizing I was already kind of fasting because when you're backpacking, you're burning a lot of calories and you're not eating that much, right? And so you feel hunger pains a lot more. Let me put it this way: the best food you'll ever eat in your life is when you're backpacking, and it's because of how hungry you are. Anything tastes good. And if you know how to pack good food, even if it's mediocre, it tastes like the best 5-star Michelin thing you'd ever eat in your life because you're so in the mood for food and you're so hungry and you need your body's craving the calories, it's craving the protein, all the stuff you need to keep on moving on throughout that day. Um, but praying and fasting at the same time of practice in the wilderness. Praying I've done a lot more of. I think it's a biblical thing. And I have a Bible verse right here that I want to, now that we're on the topic of wilderness and fasting and praying, um, specifically with praying in the wilderness. In Luke chapter 5, verse 16, talking about Christ, it says, and he withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. There was a huge multitude of people wanting to be healed by him. Um, and instead of going and spending time with them, healing their infirmities, he went actually and spent some time with the Lord. In heaven, God the Father, God the Son went and withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. And you see it happen often in the Bible, and so much of the Old Testament with the prophets and their encounters with God are in the wilderness, are in this place that is secluded, away from people, not a place made by hands, but like a cathedral made by God. That's why they call it the Green Cathedral. Um, I've known brothers, and I've done this myself, not as well as other brothers because my spot is harder to get to. But I know brothers who have a specific spot in a wilderness area, whether if they have lots of acreage on their land or somewhere that they hike to that they know nearby. And it's a prayer place. It's a place where it's intimate between them and God that they make regular for um, their communion with God when it comes to pouring their hearts out to Him. And so I've done that in the past too. I mine is just very hard to get to, and so it hasn't been the most productive thing for me. I found a better spot's a little easier for me to get to, but it's not as secluded, whereas the other one was. And so it almost put a barrier with me wanting to go there. I'd say find a place that's easier to get to if that's something you're interested in. But I think there's a lot of value and worth in having almost like a Ebenezer that's between you and God, something that is special and real. And I'm just a sentimental person, so maybe it works more for me than other people. But I think it's a psychological thing too, probably as well. Having an association with a spot, meaningful, something that really is a pull away the distractions of the world and have a one on one with God. Talk about Justin. When you are backpacking or camping and you're in your way away from the city, and your conversations with God, do they feel different? Do they look different when you're? I know it's personal and more intimate, but how do the outdoors heighten that conversation? Do they, or is it no different than your bedroom? Or do you think there's something special to being out there?
It depends on whether I decide to consciously place, um, trying to think of the right word, but if I consciously place an emphasis on knowing that I'm in nature, then it can be different. But then there's other times where I'm just kind of in nature and then it's the same. Um, I think I'm generally less of a sentimental person. So if I'm not in the right frame of mind, then I just kind of revert to my normal, just how I talk to God and how I think about God and those kinds of things. But then there are some times where, you set up a hammock out in the middle of nowhere and you're just sitting there thinking and you're just swaying in the breeze or whatever it is. And you just have a chance, or, sitting by the edge of a stream, you just have a chance to really sit down and think about the world around you and to contemplate life in a sense. And we mentioned this way earlier in the podcast, but this idea of living in a concrete jungle and how the world around us isn't really reality, right? We've got all these concrete structures around us. We have our houses with heated air and refrigerators to keep our food cold for, weeks at a time. And we have all of these amenities of modern life, which I'm very grateful for, to be honest. But it's different, right? People don't wake up every morning wondering if, at least not in America, people don't wake up every morning wondering if they're going to be killed by a bear, right? Or a lion or something like that. People just kind of get in their cars and go to work, and then they come home and you have lights on until midnight or whatever it is. Like, a lot of our existence is unnatural in the sense that man has developed technology to kind of exceed the bounds of nature. So that's when I feel the most difference in my thoughts towards God or my prayers, is when I'm actively thinking about that, actively thinking about the nature that God designed and created and is almost set aside for me in a sense, where I can go visit it and I can be completely separate from my normal life. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Would you say that even if you're not a spiritual mindset while you're out there, you still feel refreshed when you come back? Like even while you're out there, even if you're just playing spike ball with the boys and you're not doing anything spiritual,
Yeah.
but you're on Mount Hermon or you're somewhere like that, like you come back feeling different than if you were to go to the park in a city, right?
Yeah. Almost always. The one time I didn't feel that way was when I lost my wallet when we went backpacking. So that was not
Oh
fun.
shoot. I forgot about that.
But other than, dumb stuff like that, I pretty much always feel better, significantly better after coming back from being outdoors. Yeah, I
It's
would
good.
say so.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's something special to it, and this kind of ties into now what I was talking about with this is where my mind was going today as I was listening to the book. at work. I listen to the audiobook while I'm working. And just again, the way that the Tolkien writes, going back to the Lord of the Rings and kind of like the analogy and almost like a parable, it the outdoor it came to life more to me because again, a lot of the book, and I'm sure if you've seen the movies too, which isn't perfectly accurate to the book, but a lot of the book is them just traveling for a long period of time in the wilderness over mountains, and there's so much descriptive detail into the sound of the wind through the trees and the sun glowing on the leaves and just the beautiful articulate way of describing nature that only one person who has actually walked in them and lived in them and not just admired them from a picture online, but actually smelt what wet leaves smell like in winter, or know what the dust from a red dirt road feels like in your lungs. Like that type of person who's been there and feels it is able to richly write about it the way that Tolkien does. And the simpleness, the funny thing, because even though I wanted to talk about the grandeur of the story, you started off the podcast saying something I didn't know you were going to bring up, but kind of went in the direction I was already thinking about, the simpleness of life and to be grateful for the small things that we do have, that we're not being persecuted the way many Christians are, or even regardless of that, that we have our health and we have the commodities that we have of our daily life. The story of the book is this epic tale. There's something that is so much greater than every single individual person, though each of them have a very significant part that plays in the greater story of something that is not just life and death for the individual protagonists, but for the earth in whole being swallowed up in complete darkness. And so there's this insane, cumbersome burden put on the protagonist. This ring, right, put on Frodo, this halfling, this small creature that is not even human, right? Um, but because of his heart being something that is so much more pure than the heart of man, and just the Hobbit type of people, which are the creatures in the book, he's able to bear that burden, and it's not able to affect him the same way it would maybe the men or the elves or wizards or whatever it is. And maybe the listeners, this is all silly talk to them, but there's a something beautiful in this allegory that he's writing that I feel when I'm listening to it. O- over over the course of the story, you have these characters going through the wilderness, going over mountains, encountering dangers and things that want to take their lives and are trying to steal this very powerful, burdensome ring from the protagonists and the characters. And they're all very flawed in their own ways as well, as a good writer writes his characters and humanizes them. But the beautiful thing, and I just noticed, and it was making me laugh as I was listening because it reminded me of my own backpacking trips. Even in the midst of like the worst of perils and after life-threatening things, this party of hobbits and a man and dwarf and elf and wizard, they're finding times, even though many of them have beefs that are as feudal as they get, that are from thousands of years old between like the elves and the dwarves, and they still take time to break bread together in the forest, to make food, to make jokes, to sing songs is the thing that stood out to me the most. As they're going, and there's so many times where Tolkien pauses and he just full on writes out an entire like paragraph or a whole 2 pages worth of just a character singing a song. And the song is either about some history that they've been through that is honestly encouraging because it's almost like a battle story. And sometimes they're more sadder, but they're these ballads and there's these stories. It's not just like a Taylor Swift song that is trash, right? That means nothing and affects no one, but just makes you depressed and sad and doesn't actually instill anything in you besides that of self-loathing. These are deeper. These are, even if they have a sadder, more um somber tone to them, are still instilling something that is motivational, something that is still what do you call deeper and fulfilling, something that actually holds a greater depth to the person that's singing it and to the listeners. And it reminded me of a time when I was backpacking. And I've done this, I think, once or twice, but the last backpacking trip I went on was one of the most special ones I did. I went with my mentor, brother Sam Sarka, and I actually did a mountaintop experience with him on my YouTube channel. If you're interested in seeing the views, they're gorgeous. You can go find on YouTube on Mountaintop Experiences Sam Sarka, Sam SZRKA. If you want to understand the story I'm talking about here. Though this isn't in the video, you can see the trail we were walking on as this happened. But we found ourselves hiking, and just out of the monotony of the moment of losing conversation, not having much more to talk about, we just start quoting hymns. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I want to talk about it again because I forgot how special it was. And just reading this book today reminded me of it. It was almost a one for one thing. And as we're walking, I start the beginning of a hymn. And I start quoting the first verse of it, but then I forget how the rest of it goes. But he remembers because he was raised listening to the same hymns. And so then he completes the second part, but then he forgets the next part. And together we're walking, and we're not even necessarily singing a little bit. Not that we are much of singers, but it's almost more of chants as we hike, because we hiked, I think, like 20 some miles, and with heavy things on our back. But it's motivational because there's this allegory of the heavy burdens that we're carrying on our back and the things that me and him both had going on in our own individual lives that were weighing heavy on us for a long time. And we're here in God's creation. We're here going over this physical obstacle that feels very similar to that of the burdensome mental and spiritual burdens and obstacles that we have in our own lives back home. And we're 6 hours from home in the middle of literally nowhere. I mean, nowhere, as remote as you probably can get outside of Antarctica in our state, you know? And no one for miles, beyond miles. And so it really is just me, him, and the Lord. And so we have the time to have these conversations, but these songs, they're so rich and they're deep. And I don't mean to dog on the praise and worship and the modern day songs, but they really do have the theological depth of a fortune cookie. But these hymns, like you hear them and you see them being read, or you see them being written by people who have been through such hardship throughout their lives, like safe in the arms of Jesus, safe on his gentle breast. The song is written by a person whose child is dying in their arms. And the poetry, and it maybe I'm just glorifying them too much, but we stopped with the hymns once we kind of ran out of ideas with hymns because they kind of went out of our mind. And then we started with scripture and we started chanting that. I would start the beginning of a chapter and he would finish the rest of it, just trying to do our best from memory. I would start the beginning of a verse and he would correct me, and it's actually better said this way. And then we'd talk about it. And it was just this beautiful, beautiful thing that to me is one of the most happiest moments of my life. And I get to experience that, I feel, every time I do go backpacking, which is not as much as I wish I could. I wish I could live my whole life that it was just something as simple as wandering over the mountains, thinking about things of the Lord Jesus Christ. But the analogy there, and just feeling that almost reminiscence sense as I'm reading The Lord of the Rings, and it's just this warm feeling comes over me of just like, that's true. That's the true peace that I know, that like is so easy to forget in this concrete jungle that we live in. That is so easy outside of anything natural, ordained and instituted by God, which is what our culture and the antichrist culture and sociocultural lives we live is trying to gas out so much of our lives and strangle out of our humanhood, trying to take out the most essential part of it, which is that daily battle that we walk and that cross we carry for Christ that so many people don't even know exists. It's like trying to explain color to a blind person like me and you've said before. And it made me think to what you were saying at the beginning of this podcast, how they're being chased by evil forces that are trying to kill them and their lives are on the line. But it's the simple moments of laughing with friends around a campfire, breaking bread with them being rosy cheeked from maybe just a little bit too much mead or a little bit too much beer. Nothing that I would consider to be sinful, but nothing that they're even committing sinful acts. They're laughing and they're singing and they're joyful and they're enjoying each other's presence. And I think that's fun. if we're going to talk about people who pursue fun, that to me is what I want my life to be. I want to endure the cross that God has for me and for you to bear in my daily life, and to fight the battle that I think, I mean, you want to fight here on this podcast and on the Not Normal podcast, and expose the darkness and to shine a light there, and to encourage people to fight a good fight of faith, but to be connected to their creator throughout the outdoors and through servanthood. The very things that Jesus connected the most of the creator to was through, as he is the creator, but through the Father, was through servanthood, was through being in the wilderness. We want to encourage people there, but then as we fight that Apostle Paul talks about and uses words of warfare, I then think about the still moments of when I can have friends over the house and me and you like can share that simple, warm evening talking about things of God, of singing those songs, of reminding each other verses, of doing what me and you are doing right now. Having this weekly podcast has been that very thing for me. I've had rough days recently. I've had rough weeks. I've had rough years recently. But this is like warmness. This is fun. This is enjoying. This is so much more purposeful and meaningful and long lasting, and something that is what I think the Fellowship of the Ring, the people who were on such a hard voyage as we are on as Christians. And obviously, as we know, it's not nearly as bad as people are being persecuted across the world. But Satan doesn't sleep, whether you're rich or poor, and the battle is real just the same. But I don't know. That's what it made me reconnect and just think about the pleasantries of being connected to God outside in the wilderness, and the still small encounters I have with God, the same way he encountered Elijah when he was depressed and when he was going through hard times and carrying a heavy burden of feeling like he's the only one left in the kingdom that still serves God. And the rushing wind and the tornado and the earthquake and all the crazy things that happening to him, the Spirit talked to him in a still small voice outside of the kingdom in the wilderness. So I know it was a long thought, but it's been brewing in my mind all day. And I wanted to connect what you said at the beginning of the podcast because it's funny enough. Though I wanted to talk about the outdoors, what I really wanted to talk about was the simple things in life that really are meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful. And it's people. It's all the things outside of you.
Hmm.
I don't know. I know it's
But,
long, but what are your
well,
thoughts?
at the same time, while you're describing all of these things and kind of painting a picture of this joy that you feel, even though it's just as simple as sitting around a campfire with friends or something like that. I don't know if you can really truly experience that joy and that peace unless you know God, right? I think there is a qualitative difference about a believer who has given his life to Christ, who spiritually has mortified the old man, right? Romans talks about this idea of burying the old man and rising in the image or the likeness of Christ. And there's something there that changes inside of a person, inside of their spirit. There's something there that changes. And I think that change is kind of what makes it so much more special, to be honest. I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of atheists or people that worship other gods or other religions. I'm sure they have those times too. But there's a difference when you just have this closeness with God and you're able. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit is, do you ever just kind of in a group setting when there's a lot of people talking or whatever, there's a group of people that are just enjoying their time together. Do you ever just kind of sit back and just listen, and intentionally you're not part of any conversations, intentionally you're not trying to talk to anybody or pick out any specific conversations. You just sit back and you listen, and you're just grateful that you're there in that time. Do you ever do that?
I do it all the time. People think I'm kind of more extroverted, but when it comes to church events, where especially if I'm like the last time I was in Michigan and and in Florida, the big church events, so many people talking, and I'm sitting in the sanctuary. I'm good when it comes to something like this, but in that huge group setting, I just go and I sit down and I just lean back and I just absorb it, and I just
Mm-hmm.
look at it and I just enjoy it, and I
Mm-hmm.
just like, even sometimes during singing at
Mm-hmm.
church, we have like hour singing. I don't even sing. I'll just sit back and I imagine, and maybe people think this is weird and extreme, but I imagine myself in a prison cell. And I say, if I'm ever in a prison cell one day for my faith, I'll be looking back with golden glasses at days like this, saying, those were the good days. What I would do just to hear some a cappella hymns once more ringing through halls. And I just sit back and I just enjoy the moment and I try to absorb it. And so that it's not just something I'm going through, but something that I'm experiencing.
Yeah. I have very similar ideas, right? One of my favorite things to do ever is after a church service, especially if you have a big event like a wedding or a baptism or something like that. After a church service, when everybody gets up after the final hymn or the benediction or whatever it is, and everybody's just sitting there talking to each other. And if you take just a minute or 2 minutes to just sit in that bench and close your eyes and just listen to how happy people are and how much joy there is and how much peace and contentment, right? You could have a lot of people in the same room that passionately disagree with each other about things, but in that moment, you're just happy. And one of my favorite things to do is almost the same thing. Like, if persecution really does come to this country, this is the moment that I want to remember. These kinds of moments where I was with the people that loved me and the people that I love. And I'm grateful for the times that I have to enjoy those things and to experience those things. And so that's obviously more in a church setting, but I like doing that, around a campfire too. Just taking a second or a minute or 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but when everybody's talking around a campfire or singing around a campfire or whatever, you just take a second and just kind of, you almost zoom out of your own mind and you just let it wash over you. You absorb it. I liked how you put that. And so for me, when I go into the wilderness, that's when I get I feel the most in tune with God, is when I'm able to just experience the things around me, experience the nature around me, the people around me, and reflect on the goodness that God has had and has given to me in my life. So I think that's the best, maybe not the best, but that's the time I feel the most in tune with God.
And what you were saying is like you're saying you don't know exactly what it is or why it is with God, why it makes it differently than sure an atheist can have that bond with a person. But I think what they're tapping into is exactly the thing you're talking about. And that is the difference between if I'm sitting at a campfire with you or a fellow brother in Christ, it's not just that I'm enjoying this moment with them. First and foremost, to what you had just finished saying there at the end, what that is that's real. You do zoom out of yourself and you realize this is real in a way that I can't rightly articulate. But this is real and I know it and I feel it in my soul. Everything else, it's because you're touching something that is from the hand of God. And you feel this small grasp at eternity where, and this is where the key difference is. When you do have God with you, you're not just sitting with another mammal around a campfire who owes you nothing and you owe them nothing, because that's what it is if God is not real. That bond or that fellowship with you have that person is very conditional and it's very much based on them treating you correctly and you treating them correctly. And there is no eternal stake in each other at all. In the end, it really is the hierarchy of the animal kingdom if we are just flesh and bone and stardust particles. Sure, you could feel nice and you can feel connected to them because you are escaping, but what you're really doing is you're tapping into something spiritual. But with the Christian mindset, the true mindset of what is really happening there and why it is so much deeper there, and what you said, like you can't fully experience it without God, what you see is someone that you're going to spend eternity with. And you have a foresight of eternity. That's what it makes me think of when I sit across from this person, and why I feel more connected with that person when I'm having that breaking that bread around that campfire, or even in my own living room, but especially in the outdoors. It's because I see this person as my brother in Christ. And a sigh of like somberness comes over me, of just almost like eternity might be ahead of me, but right now what we do is going to ring in eternity. And this connection I'm having with this person right now is not rooted in this fireplace or this campfire. It's not rooted in the outdoors. It's rooted in Jesus Christ and what he did for me and him. And it's something that binds us together like no war bond or brotherly bond that's over the tragedies of war, like people have their brothers that they find in the military. This is one that is deeper than that because it's first off instituted by God, but it's a spiritual warfare. It's something that is touching something deeper than just the external life we're living, but it's connecting to our eternal soul. And so when you're around that campfire and you are escaping from the distractions of this world that are just not real, they're real in how that they affect a life, but they're not real in that they're going to burn one day. And when you sit in that spot or you're hiking that trail and you're touching with your feet the ground that is not concrete but dirt, and you're walking past the trees that aren't lampposts of metal, but things that God grew. Like this thing grew out of the ground. It's a living organism. You're walking past things that are from the hand of God. And maybe people think this is a too uber hippie duper spiritual way of looking at it, but you can't explain it unless you've actually touched it and done it yourself. And then when you are with someone else there, what you're looking at is another participator in eternity. And that is a weight. That is a weight that is not something simply said. It's something that is very real when you look at it that way. And it's hard to understand from my bedroom right now with lights on me and a computer and a freeway in my backyard and the loudness of what's going on in the world around me. But it's most like quiet and you're most open to it when you're fasting from the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be food because that's really what the wilderness is. And so I think to your point, that is what is happening. That is the reason why it is so much more deeper as a Christian. And it's not just a bonding moment with someone. It's something that is tapping into the eternal perspective. There's that famous saying, God, stamp eternity on my eyeballs. Life becomes so short and small when you're looking at trillions of stars, more than you've ever seen in your life in the middle of nowhere. And you realize how small you are, but how significant God made you by coming and dying for you. And then you realize how short life is because of the age of those stars and the fact they keep moving even though you'll die soon. And it doesn't make you fear anything outside of God, because then not only do you realize he instituted those things and he's in control, but there's also a weight that comes upon you of responsibility for that life you're living, that it is short and there's an eternity waiting. What I do here affects that eternity. And I don't think work stops here. I think it continues into eternity, the work we do for the Lord. I'm sure he has many wonderful things planned for us. So that's the burden that's been on my heart recently. That's what I've been feeling. And that verse I put in the Discord, here I am, Lord, send me, as I think it's Isaiah 60 or Isaiah 61. Who shall go for me and whom shall I send? Here am I, Lord, send me. Does that excite you when you hear that? Or is that scary in a negative way? Because fear can be a good thing. I don't know. Maybe that explains what you were trying to articulate about what you don't know connects them, but I think
Yeah.
that's the difference. You're not looking at a mammal across across the campfire. You're looking at a participator in a burden you're both sharing. That's it. How the eternal weight of glory, as Apostle Paul puts it.
Well, you identify essentially, um, it means so much more because of the eternal weight, right? And nothing in this body or this realm is going to be eternal, right? This body that I have, the body that you have, even the mountains around us that are outside, those will cease to exist. They'll be completely destroyed. And so really the most important thing is the spirit, the spiritual realm. And I really, just to bring this back to the concept of fasting, fasting is intentionally putting aside the things of the physical flesh, the physical body, so that you can spend more time in the spiritual body, in the spiritual mind, praying to God and focusing on, um, limiting the physical desires of hunger. And that's a very real thing. When I did my, it was, again, maybe a day and a half, maybe 2 days. It wasn't anything crazy, but it really opened my eyes to how much food is a part of my life. And I'm sure anybody who tries it realizes how much food is a part of their life, especially being in America where it's so abundant. But having snacks all around us, like I have snacks anywhere I want. I can just go buy a little snack or some sort of drink or anything. There's always something that I can be filling myself with, even if like I'm just bored, right? People eat just when they're bored. But intentionally setting that aside and saying, you know what? Yeah, I am hungry, but instead of my hunger, I'm going to focus on praying. I think that is a battle that is worth fighting. And it's one that I would like to try to do more this year, as I've mentioned. I'm excited to. I think it would be really cool to go 5 days. I don't know how good it would be to just do it cold turkey or just out of nowhere. So maybe build up to it. But I think that'll be my goal is to try for 5 days and to see what happens, to see how I feel. And I think, just doing it just to hit the little check mark on it and say, yeah, I did it. That's not the point, right? It's to really sincerely seek a stronger spiritual connection with God. And you do that by limiting the physical connection that you have to this world.
Yeah, our church just started a fasting program for anyone who wants to join. We basically meet in groups, and everyone goes to different families' houses. There's a rotation, so everyone can kind of be a part of each other. But basically, every group has their own prayer. They get together and they all share prayer requests with each other. And then the week before prayer meeting at church, which is the first Sunday of every month, they spend the 3 days fasting and praying over a prayer list that they came up with each other. So it could be about you yourself personally and the struggles you're having, or just for needs that different people have in the church. And then we all come together we're supposed to all come together on the first Sunday of the month and pray together. And so that's something that's new in our church that I think is actually really good. That I'm very thankful that we started doing, and I think a lot of people had really good experiences with it. But yeah, that's um that's what I kind of was thinking about today. So before we get to the questions, I guess I would just say spend time with your loved ones. Enjoy the still small moments of breaking bread with someone, being in a warm house, sharing a drink, laughing over something that is silly and immature, and making Christ the center of your relationships. And remember when you're seeing that person across the fireplace from you or across the campfire, what you're seeing is the image of God. What you're seeing is someone intrinsically valued because there's a savior out there who died for them and loves them. And so, whether it is the escaping to the wilderness to draw close to God, or the fasting and the praying in your own room, or whatever it is, there's an eternal weight of glory we carry, but it's not all doom and gloom. There's such beautiful moments in the world, and they're so much more simpler than chasing this ecstasy that this world is just trying to use to escape, like Justin said, that are just trying to distract themselves from the inevitable. The inevitable for us is that grave, where is thy sting? O death, where is thy victory? Because death is swallowed up in victory because of Christ rising from the dead and defeating sin and death on the cross and that empty tomb. So yeah, think of the warm moments. Warm. I didn't say war. Think of the warm moments because there is war ahead of us and it doesn't stop. Any last thoughts, Justin, before we go to the chat and answer some timely questions?
Yeah, I'll make this pretty quick. I didn't know where this was going to go, but I found two things in the scripture that I thought were pretty interesting. And it essentially revolves around the idea of fasting as an individual and fasting in groups and what's better. And my answer is it's not really better. It's just different application. And so to talk about two things really quickly. One, I didn't know this until before coming on the podcast today, but in 1 Corinthians 7, there's this idea of if two people are having trouble in their marriage, if a man and a woman are having trouble in their marriage, there's this commandment given. It says, defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. So the idea is, even though you're married, even though you're a couple, separate from each other and pray and fast and spend that time in the Lord, connecting with Him, deepening your relationship with Him. And then once that's done, then you can come back together. And oftentimes I think about the marriage relationship as doing everything together, right? Especially when you're in your own household, it's kind of your time to be away from the rest of the world. But this is saying to take it a step further and separate from your spouse and to really focus on your relationship just between you and the Lord. And then I contrast that with the story of Esther, which I've gone through it a couple times. It's a little difficult to understand for me, but at a very high level, there's a beautiful woman named Esther. She's a Jew, and the king, due to various circumstances, ends up marrying her, and he wants to make her the queen. And so Esther has, I believe it's a cousin named Mordecai. Couple characters I have to set up. So there's Esther the queen, there's the king, and then there's the cousin Mordecai, and then there's a guy that's part of the king's court. I forget what his name. Let's see if we can find it real quick. His name
Isn't it like
is
Darius or something?
No, I think it's also Haman.
Haman, yeah, that's right, Haman, yeah.
So Haman has been promoted by the king, and he thinks he's all high-minded. He thinks he's so important. And there was a custom where when Haman walked in, because he held this very high office of whatever, when he walked into the room, everybody was supposed to bow to him. But Esther's cousin Mordecai did not bow to him. And so this Haman got really, really angry, and he did some digging into Mordecai's past or whatever, and he finds out that Mordecai is a Jew. And so imagine how petty this is, or not even petty, it's just evil. But he finds out that this one man who didn't bow down to him is a Jew. And so he basically tricks the king into signing a declaration to genocide the Jews from that country. Very, very interesting. I didn't really know this until before the podcast. But so one man offends him. He decides to get revenge on the entire bloodline by murdering all the Jews. And then Esther hears about this, and she ends up helping to prevent that from happening. She saves that from happening through a very heroic act of her own, which I encourage everybody to go read for themselves, because it's a really, really amazing account. But part of the account is she tells her cousin Mordecai, and she basically says, go spread to all of the Jewish people this commandment. She says, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. So she's about to go do this really, really hard thing, and it's all on her shoulders. And she says, get the entire nation to pray for me. I need everybody to pray and to fast. So we contrast these two ideas of, even in a marriage, sometimes you have to split off and spend that time focusing on your relationship with God, just one-on-one. And there is great power in that. But then on the other hand, sometimes there is great power in coming together as a group to fast. So those were two interesting things I didn't know about beforehand and wanted to share.
That is really cool. I do think group fasting and praying is actually extremely important, and it's something that is just so foreign to us. And that's honestly kind of, again, goes back to the outdoors. Like, you are naturally fasting outdoors. Like, you're not eating food when you're backpacking, especially if you're going like car camping and you just pack a car full of, food, then okay, that's called glamping. And I mean, as long as you're outdoors, whatever. But I think there's something special about backpacking where there's a goal. You're going from start point A to point B, and you're surviving with nothing but what you bring in your backpack. So you have limited stuff, and so it really is minimalistic. Like, the art of backpacking is, the more you get into it, the more lighter stuff you buy, the more compact it is, the less stuff you bring. The first time going camping and the first time backpacking is supposed to be a miserable experience for you because you have no idea what you're doing. And you realize the next time, you're like, man, I didn't need to bring this. I didn't need to bring that. This was way extra more weight than I needed. Man, that was uncomfortable if I slept like this way and I didn't set up my mat this way, or I was too close to the water and so I was cold. And there's so many things you learn, and it's a very there's a lot of suffering involved in this hobby, um but it's something that's worth it. The blessings that come from it and the parallels and the stories and the lessons you can learn in life are really good. And I don't know how many people know this, but my older brother, who started the ambassadors group, he wrote a book for the ambassadors group years ago, and he has only one copy and it's laminated, and it's something that I want to cover here in the podcast more. And a lot of it is teaching survival skills, which we want to start making YouTube videos here probably in the summer, or whenever things get warm, or whenever he's available, because he's a busy guy too, about outdoor survival, as well as Christian, excuse me, teaching, as well as Christian teachings. And the way he does a lot of them is he takes concepts of the outdoors and he applies it to scripture. And one of them is like a consuming fire, and how to make a fire, and where do we see fire in scripture in relation to God, or into positive and negative ways. And it was just funny because I opened a new devotional today that I wanted to read, and then we can go and ask questions after I read this real quick excerpt from this devotional. It's actually a book my cousin Peter let me borrow. It's by A.W. Tozer, who's a good author. It's called Meditations on the Trinity, um, Beauty, Mystery, and Glory into the Life of God. So I've just recently started, so I can't give my full opinion on it, but I have read Tozer before, and he's a good reader. And there's just this very short thing that made me think of the outdoors, though not implicitly what he's saying. He's talking about God the Father here, but just talking about fire in general. I thought it was pretty, and I thought I'd share it, and then we can go and ask some questions, and people can answer whatever questions they want in the podcast and the Discord. So I fell on my face is the title here. Just because God cannot tell us what he is, he very often tells us what he is like. By these like figures, he leads our faltering mind as close as they can come to the light which no man can approach unto. 1 Timothy 6:16. Through the more cumbersome medium of the intellect, the soul is prepared for the moment when it can, through the operation of the Holy Spirit, know God as he is in himself. God has used a number of these similitudes to hint at his incomprehensible being. And judging from the scriptures, one would gather that his favorite similitude is fire. In one place, the Spirit speaks expressly. I'm Petrovic, I can't pronounce English. For our God is a consuming fire. Hebrews 12:29. This accords with the revelation of himself as recorded throughout the Bible. As a fire, he spoke to Moses from the burning bush. And the fire, he dwelt above the camp of Israel through all the wilderness journey. As fire, he dwelt between the wings of the cherubim and the Holy of Holies. To Ezekiel, he revealed himself as a strange brightness of a fire enfolding itself. Ezekiel 1:4. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. Great God, and then it ends with the prayer. Great God, if I really saw you in all your majesty, I too would fall on my face before you. And this is only a glimpse of what you are. Show me your glory, I pray. Amen. And devotional I read today, it just made me think of when you're looking into that fireplace in the middle of nowhere, and you have Christ in your heart and you're spiritually minded. You think of these things. You see the analogies that God uses and Christ uses in scripture. And the last thing I wanted to point out with what I was talking about earlier in the podcast about that warmness of breaking bread with people around a campfire in the wilderness or outside, or even in your own house, that we carry this eternal weight of glory and the responsibility of being a believer and a soldier of Christ. But as we're walking on there, we aren't chasing the pleasures of the world, even if we are breaking bread with someone, which is a physical worldly thing, and sharing a glass of wine and enjoying the presence of each other and laughing and being merry. I think what we're enjoying in those moments is a heavenly thing, a spiritual thing. Because I think of that warmness, and I look to the parable, and I look to this picture that God creates when he gathers his sheep home, and as a hen gathers her chicks home, or the shepherd his sheep, or a father his children. I don't know about you, but I believe that wedding banquet in heaven is very literal. I think of the warmness of a father as I was raised, and I know maybe some people don't have dads and they can't relate to this. I'm sorry, but for me, like every Saturday morning and basically every Sunday morning, I'd wake up to the smell of bacon. My dad making a huge breakfast feast. I don't eat breakfast throughout the whole week except for on a Saturday and Sunday when my dad would wake us all up as kids, and you could hear him calling our names from upstairs. We all run upstairs, and he has this whole meal just laid out for us. And he's a good cook too, especially when it comes to breakfast. Eggs, bacon, cucumbers, tomatoes, bell peppers, sypsky salada, dude. Like, I know to Americans it sounds weird that we're eating vegetables for breakfast, but cut up tomatoes with eggs is so good. It's the best thing in the world. And onions and green onions from the garden, freshly picked, like with eggs and the whole 9 yards, and kobatice and shunka, these meats that we smoked in our own backyard. And I think of that wedding feast that God has prepared for us, and us all sitting down there, and just the smile of pride on God's face as he looks at his children who are now sitting at that wedding banquet, and just like the warmth and that feeling. And I feel like we're tapping into a little bit of that every time we break bread with our brothers and sisters in Christ, when we remove ourselves from the worries of this world and we go into what I think is the closest thing to heaven, the outdoors, where it's something that was just created from the touch of God. It's not a concrete jungle. It's not filled with the distractions and the worries of Satan that he tries to make us to distract us from God. But it's just us and nothing protecting us but God and whatever you have in your backpack to keep the bears away. So I don't know. I just was thinking of that parable today, and I was thinking of God and fire and just so many different ways you can experience God, and the way he often uses very natural wilderness-esque type language to describe himself, his relationship with people. And that what we talked about earlier isn't as worldly as we think. It's very, very much a spiritual thing that is um, seen in Revelations and seen throughout Scripture. So, do you have any other last? I know you kind of already shared your last thought, but do you want to get to the questions now in Discord?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Anyone got any questions or thoughts that they want? I mean, there's some of these questions specifically by Peter that are questions I think can only be answered on the Not Normal podcast that are just not. One comment by our good friend Julian here. He says, "There's nothing in nature that brings me closer to God than when I see the mountains. Being at Pikes Peak and seeing the sea of mountains that just screams the beauty to me of God's creation and his glory. I wish I could hike that and have a prayer place, but alas, I'm too far." And okay, I won't read that part to embarrass him. He says some self-deprecating humor to survive the hike. You're a go-looking guy. All right, don't say that, Julian.
A
You can do it.
go-looking guy? What is that? A good-looking guy?
I meant to say good. Sorry, I was
Oh.
scrolling and reading things at the same time. Someone said Petrific Boys filling the shoes of the Outdoor Boys. Oh yeah. Peter asking questions again that I just cannot answer. Not supposed to lie, bro. I'm not lying, Julian. Starting to sound like me now. Let's see. Peter, okay, we can read this question. Um, do you think if furries
No.
existed
Oh.
back in the time of Noah, they would be on the ark or rightfully washed away? I think if
We know
furries
the
were
answer. We know the answer to that.
Peter doesn't ask any serious questions. Just comes on here to troll. I don't know how you go 6 days without breakfast. Not very Petrovic of you. Pretty sure most Petrovics don't go every day without breakfast. But as I'm reading The Lord of the Rings, it does sound very, oh my gosh, it does sound very like hobbits do sound like Petrovics. Phil Laza just sent a picture of furries drowning in the flood. Why do they have life
They have
vests?
life vests. That's crazy.
Why are they smiling, dude? Why does one of them have nail polish on?
Okay, moving on. That's whack.
Peter's the only reason I joined the calls, what Joey said.
So
Any questions?
I think
Joey, you got any questions?
somebody had a good question. Where'd it go? Oh, I think Julianne said, "Do you think there can be too much fasting?" I would say yes. Obviously, I think the point of fasting is to temporarily put aside the physical so that you can enhance the spiritual. But you could definitely go too far with that, right? You die if you don't eat food. long enough. So yes, you can go too long without fasting. You can also do some really, really serious harm to yourself, right? Jesus fasted for 40 days, which who knows? Maybe I'll get to a point in my life where I'll do that. But that is generally like very severe physical um deprecation is not the right word, but your body really seriously is affected by that. So I don't know.
I agree. I think for some people, fasting looks very different than for everyone. One of the best fastings I ever did was social media fasting. I know that sounds ridiculous to people, but when
Mhm.
you're Gen Z, it is something you're kind of it's a real problem. Um,
So real quick, Julian just clarified. He says not in the sense of 2 weeks straight, but doing it too many times. Um, that's
I
an
think if it affects your
interesting.
health,
I
which is
think
what I was getting at.
it affects your health. But there was a guy, just some random guy that started coming to our church, and I don't know, he left to Wyoming a while ago or something. But he said that he fasted for 1 week out of every month, and he seems to have been perfectly healthy. So I
Yeah,
don't really know, to be honest. I don't know. I maybe in our current day where there's just a lot of processed things and we're generally not super healthy in the food that we eat, maybe something like that would be helpful. So
it is
I
definitely healthy for you. A lot of people do fast to like reset their bodies, and it's been shown to like actually get rid of parasites and other things like that. But what you are doing is starving your body, right? So I
Mhm.
mean, if you weigh like 300 pounds, and yeah, maybe you got to fast a little bit more. But I personally have a hard time with fasting from physical food. I've done it many times throughout my life, sometimes regularly, and it wasn't purposefully, just because of anxiety. I just couldn't swallow, like, it was hard for me to swallow food for a big part of my life. And so there's a reason I weigh 130 pounds at the age of 25. It's because I spent most of my teenage years like not eating any food because of my mental health struggles with anxiety and stuff. And so I basically fasted for 10 years of my life. And now that I'm older and I eat normally and I don't have that stuff problems, I still struggle here and there with like the anxiety and eating regularly. Um, I find if I try to fast, I get very weak, and my job is very labor intensive, and there's a lot of times I'm on very tall ladders, and if I don't eat anything and I'm feeling very weak and I'm physically exerting myself running around with heavy bags on my waist all day, I could pass out while on a ladder. I could fall very easily. I could paralyze myself. I could hurt myself. And also sometimes my job involves other people's lives when you're working on electrical stuff. If I go and I'm not clear minded and I flip on a breaker that someone's working on something, it could literally kill them. So, um, Peter, you seriously, why don't you ask me these questions on normal podcasts? I'd read them out loud and I'd die laughing to them. He asked the most absurd question. So I think fasting looks different for everyone. Everyone has a different thing you can fast from. The point is you're abstaining from something that maybe you crave or need, and so that you can focus on God and you can focus on, or in the, you kind of like putting yourself through purposeful pain so that you can rely on God in the midst of that pain. And I think there's also health effects for it too. But some people, I mean, I tried fasting recently about like a year ago and it messed up my stomach really bad. Like I think I was on like day two and I was having such bad stomach pains. I was like, this is not okay. Like I had to really like, I have to do incremental fasting where like I just don't eat anything until dinner. And so I still get the hunger pains, excuse me, but I'm not like, I don't know. It sucks. Everyone has a different, some people who work an office job can probably do a little bit better, but be wise. We're not encouraging anyone to fast at all.
So there's another question. Do you think it could lose its spiritual effectiveness if you do it too much, essentially? And so I think it kind of comes down to your intention behind fasting, right? There are so many people that just fast as a health fad. They'll just starve themselves because they want to be skinnier, right? If that's your goal, if that's what you want out of fasting,
Looks maxing.
looks maxing, then you're already starting out from a place that's not spiritual, right? So I think if your intention is to be spiritually minded, I don't really see how fasting could lose its effectiveness. I think it would just gain effectiveness. But you don't want to damage your body, right? Starving yourself for your looks is not a healthy or intelligent thing to do, right? Just as
Yeah.
starving yourself too long because you're praying for weeks and
Well, if
weeks
you're
and weeks isn't
malnourished, you
healthy.
literally start losing brain like cells.
Yeah.
Like it actually affects your people who are like anorexic and bulimic and stuff like that, like their brains actually like lose like, they actually have permanent damage, brain damage that they do to their
Oh,
brains.
wow.
Your brain's a huge source of fat, bro.
Yeah, that is true.
And when you malnourish it long enough, it does cause permanent brain damage.
That's wild. I believe it. I have not seen that before, though.
Yep, I've been told that by people and doctors, so it's a real thing. Does it lose its spiritual effectiveness? I'd say, if I can put it that way. Do you think it could lose its spiritual? I don't know. I think fasting has to be for a reason. If you're just doing it because you want to get a skinny waist, I mean, honestly, you could still be maybe. Joey said he fact checked it and he said it's true, according to Google AI. Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're not getting nutrition to your brain, like where do you think your brain gets all of its like it's huge muscle and fat, and it needs nutrients. It had no nutrients. Those eagle eggs were a lie, Steven. If you don't know that reference, you need help.
Leave.
But yeah, so I don't know if I would say it loses its spiritual significance. It's the heart, right? I mean, do you lose your spiritual significance if you give too much money to the poor? Well, if you're like the dude on the Pharisee on the street corner is blowing a horn and showing everyone, then yeah, Christ looks at him. He's like, you see that widow who just gave 1 pence? She gave way more than all those rich men who did it in like this fashion of like boastery or pride or a haughty. What's the word? A haughty look. I want to say high like Heidi, but a haughty is the word to use. A proud look, like that's. I think that's the intention of it. I don't think anyone who regularly fasts with God, that's like what monks do. I wouldn't say they're far from God. But yeah, any last thoughts before we wrap this up? It was a pretty solid episode, pretty chill. We talked about some awesome stuff like the Lord of the Rings. Sorry, Joe, you didn't get to hear the whole thing. You're gonna have to go back and listen to it because I think you're gonna like it a lot.
One last thing. This says the brain actually is very plastic, meaning it's very elastic.
Yours might be plastic, smooth.
Yeah.
Smooth as plastic.
Okay, Mr. Tradesman.
What's that supposed to mean? All right,
nothing.
I'd like to see you wire a house.
I don't know what you're talking about. This is just Chat GPT, so it's not like I've done my research or anything. But it says people often worry that they've ruined their brain, but that's usually not true. The brain needs nourishment to heal, and recovery is often associated with, and then it gives different things that you can do to help with your anorexia. So it could potentially, if you are anorexic for a long time, this does say it reduces your brain volume, your gray and your white matter. So your brain literally gets smaller because of it, which is not good, but it's not like that's it for you, right? Which is good. There's hope.
Yeah. Well, it does cause problems to people though.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Like it can cause like seizures. It can cause like blacking out. So I mean, imagine you're anorexic and you're driving a car or you're swimming and you just black out. You could kill someone or you could kill yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what happens like people in Africa and stuff like that. These like malnourished people and stuff like that. Like they just are walking and they just pass out on the floor and they die. Peter, ask these questions on the Not Normal podcast. That's a perfect question for the Not Normal podcast. I can't be saying this stuff on the ambassadors.
All right.
We got a few people. We got a few people. Who is Peter? Your nephew? Oh, that is funny. Peter's uncle just asked who is Peter. You may be able to wire a house, but you probably have no idea how to handle a broom. I literally spent part of the reason I'm so tired right now is I just spent the whole last part of the day sweeping up an entire house, cleaning up all my trash. That place looked spick and span. So, I'm not a commercial electrician. Well, I am a commercial electrician, but not entirely. Here comes the batin. I know people that drink bone broth while fasting. Ooh, it kind of sounds good. That sounds like supa.
Yeah.
All right, love you guys. Thanks everyone. I think everyone's done asking questions, unless Peter wants to throw one more out there. But I think
don't let him. Don't let him. Just go.
I think it's too much. Look forward to talking to you guys. The Not Normal podcast is out, by the way. I've already released 3 episodes, and one of them was an apology video. I know episode 3, and I'm already on apology video. I didn't clarify some of the things I said, and I wanted to clarify them a little bit because some things got misunderstood. But I don't plan on doing any more apology videos. All right, I'm gonna try sticking to my guns from here on out. But it was a sensitive topic, and I am not trying to alienate anyone. But it was an
Bro,
apology slash. I'm not apologizing for what I did. I apologize that you misunderstood it. So here's a clarification.
you literally got 1 9-minute episode before getting in trouble for the next episode.
Right. Oh no, it was yeah, you're right. But yeah, no, so I'm excited. If you guys have topics or things, the Not Normal podcast is where there is unfiltered, and I will just talk about any topics. The ambassadors, we're going to try sticking a little bit more to the outdoors, God, servanthood. We want to stick a little bit closer to that. And if you want to be a part of the Discord and listen live and interact like the wonderful people who are right now, yeah, and then you can talk to us afterwards. Once I'm done hanging up this podcast, I want to be talking to the people who are listening online, and love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Justin, any last things you want to say to them before we dip?
No, I think that's good. Thank you guys
All right,
for
God
listening.
bless. Tune in next Thursday for the Ambassador podcast. And if you're on Discord, we live stream it on Wednesdays nights. So toodaloo.
We'll see you then.